And I'm going to kick us off with the recording so that people can see it if they're not able to join us. But for those of you just joining, welcome to SMOSLA Live. We are here together at 1 o'clock on October 24th. Hi, Zoe. All right, as people come on board, I'm going to keep welcoming us. We're at 1:01, so I'm going to give us a couple minutes for people to get here. And in the chat, if you would like to share, I'm going to put this question. What is your SMOSLA highlight so far this semester? I would love to know what's going well for you guys. And if you have any topics that you would like to see covered today, you can answer that in the chat also. Hi, Dr. Ulrich.
Hi there, how are you?
I'm great. I cannot wait to hear more about, am I pronouncing this right? Raclette?
No, raclette, because it's French.
Okay.
So raclette.
Raclette. That sounds even more fancy. So,
It
all right,
does, doesn't it?
I'm putting that in the chat too, but you got to tell us about this. What is raclette?
It is a French cheese that is served in Germany, France, and I think Austria too, and Switzerland. And it's a great big cheese wheel that's huge. And they put it up against a heater, to the whole wheel, and melt it. And then they scrape off the cheese and put it on either bread or potatoes, which are typically the two things, and serve it melted, but it's not the consistency of brie. It's a little thicker, a little heavier,
Oh my
but
God.
it's yummy.
Well, hearing about this and realizing I've never had this, I feel like I'm living my life all wrong. That sounds unbelievably good.
We had it at my cousin's house New Year's Eve in Switzerland last year, and that's what she served us. And so I was so impressed that I had to go out and buy a raclette maker myself. So there's a way to kind of hijack that whole sophisticated process, because all these grocery stores sells the little cheese slices that you just stick in and melt. So all these makes it very simple.
Wow. All right, if you're just joining us, Anthony, it's great to see you. Aaron, I'm so glad that you're here. Thank you for joining us. We are just talking about what Dr. Ulrich ate this last weekend, and it's making me hungry. I have a favor to ask. I'm wondering if it would be all right with all of you guys, since I haven't been online with most of you this semester, if we could start off by just taking a deep breath and practicing some of the mindfulness that was part of our routine last year. I would love to just take 60 seconds, ground in, and wherever you're standing or sitting, just to take a moment. And I'm going to set my timer. I'm going to do this the old-fashioned way, just like we used to do it last
Jossie's here. Hi, Jossie. Glad you joined us.
I'm going to put my timer on for a minute. And I'm going to do this old school. I'm going to close my eyes, take a deep breath, and give myself a minute just to absolutely think about nothing or whatever comes to mind. Here we go.
Okay.
That minute always goes by so fast for me. Thank you for that. And Jossie, I'm glad that your Wi-Fi is behaving enough for you to come back with us. So I had a moment this weekend, and the moment came in the middle of a hike that I was taking. And on the Central Coast, when I go hiking, it's like a relaxing thing for me because I'm usually looking at the ocean, or at least it's not like a super steep, super challenging kind of a hike. Yeah, so Catherine, Dr. Ulrich knows what I did this last weekend. I actually was on a trail for almost 8 hours on Saturday. I went up almost 9,000 feet, 8,400 feet. And most of it was trail. And it was steep and it was hard, but trail's a trail. What I didn't know was that at about 7,000 feet, there was a place where I was going to have to cross a canyon. And the canyon was exposed. And I couldn't tell where my footing was solid or not. And I was terrified. And at that point, there's no going back. You can't hike down 7 hours and still have daylight. The only way to go was straight ahead. And I don't get scared very easily. And I don't mind telling you, I was scared. And at that altitude, you're getting less oxygen, which for me makes me anxious. So for a lot of us, it's the first time I've seen you in a long time. And I'm starting this by telling you, I was just terrified 2 days ago. Why am I telling you that now? Because a lot of us, when we're unsure of our footing, it's human, we get nervous. And because it's been a while for most of us, we haven't connected. And because this semester is going differently, what I thought I'd start with today is asking what's going well and where can I be most helpful and where can Dr. Ulrich be most helpful, since we're in a live conversation with a few of us. I've gotten some feedback about establishing our routines again, about being more creative. But I wanted to hear from you first. So this is my way of asking you, can we go around and either put in a comment or say something out loud, and then I'll pick up from there and figure out how best to use this hour. Anthony, what's going well for you? What can I help you with? And if you're in a place that's noisy, feel free to just put a comment in the chat or a question. Me, Aaron, Jossie, Liliana, Zoe.
There are plenty of words.
Is anybody willing to chip in an idea or two?
And 18 words in one chapter, so we'll need one person. Okay, so that's just 3.
Jossie, I was just asking, so like when we're feeling unsure, we tend to get anxious, right? So I'm wondering, like, what's helping you this semester? What are you feeling good about? What are you feeling nervous about? Where could you use some help? That's the question.
Numbers.
And Dr. Ulrich, I just muted your mic because I think there's some background noise in that room, but come on anytime that you want to contribute. So Zoe, what's one thing that could come out of our conversation today that would really help you going forward? Okay, I'm getting some direct messages about things like working routines, time management. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to start with some basics. And if I say something that is like, oh, well, duh, Dr. Preston, I already know this, feel free to chime in and help me move things along. I don't want to give you stuff that you already know, but I do think sometimes it helps us to hear things again. Sometimes that helps us strengthen our practice because we're already doing something and it makes us feel better, like we're on the right track. Sometimes we'll get an idea and it's like, oh, you know what? I haven't done that in a while and I should probably get back to it. And I just got a direct message about time that is really like, hey, sometimes I just need some time to myself, kind of like that mindfulness practice, even just be. So let's go back to basics and start at the beginning. And the easy way for me to do this in my mind is if I think about a normal day, I start about the beginning of my day. Well, how do I begin my day? First of all, I begin my day the night before. And I know that all of you have some really interesting sleep patterns. Some of that is because you have family obligations. Some of our students even have kids of their own. And a lot of the time, whether it's work, whether it's kind of habit forming patterns about staying up watching Netflix or looking at TikTok or whatever the thing is on a screen, sometimes it's meeting our obligations to relatives. But I'm going to give you the ideal. In an ideal world, all of us would be in bed with no screens for at least half an hour by about 10:30 at night. The reason I say in bed with no screens is because a lot of us are busy, busy, busy throughout the day. And it takes some time to unwind from that. And if you have a book, well, that's one kind of light. But if you have a screen, there's something called blue light. Now, blue light is awesome, especially at the beginning of the day. Why is blue light awesome? Because it helps you wake up. The problem is, if you're looking at blue light just before you're going to sleep, your system thinks it's waking up, and it makes it harder for you to fall asleep. So I've had to realign myself, I don't know how many times, because I get into the habit too. I'm looking at my phone, I'm responding to messages. But if I'm really thinking about what's going to help me recharge my battery, because that's the way I think about sleep, I got to put that stuff away. I owe it to myself. If I'm going to try and be at my best for you and for everybody else in my day, I got to recharge my battery. So this isn't a lecture. This is an offering. I know that all of us have pressures, but I really want you to at least put this in your mind to consider. The best way to recharge our batteries is to give ourselves that break and to put away our screens by like 9:30, 10 o'clock latest, and give ourselves that half an hour just to be. And in that half an hour, most of the time, we fall asleep. Now, fast forward. Hopefully, we've gotten a good night's sleep. The temperature in the room is kind of cool. It's kind of quiet. It's kind of dark. This is why we're better sleepers at night than we are during the day. Then we wake up. Well, what time do we wake up? For me, I'm usually awake somewhere between 4:30 and 5:30 in the morning. Now, I know that's way too early for a lot of people. But whatever time you choose to wake up, hopefully you've gotten between 6 and 8 hours of pretty solid, consistent sleep. That's important because sleep goes in cycles. And the cycle that's most important for us, especially at your stage of brain development right now, and Aureliana, this is important for your little boy too, because we get used to patterns of sleeping. And the rapid eye movement part of our sleep, it's called REM, and you can look this stuff up, is really important because we do a lot of subconscious processing, but in ways that don't cost us a lot of energy. And what happens over our sleep cycle is that by the time we wake up, you know how it is when you've been awakened by a loud noise at like 3 o'clock in the morning and you can't get back to sleep? That makes it rough. Really, on, I just saw your message. And any parent knows that when you've had to stay up with a baby, you see young parents walking around. You've also seen that show like The Walking Dead. There's some similarities in that because when we don't get our sleep, we kind of feel like zombies. So again, just to recap, the hope is that we're somewhere close to a resting state by 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. We hope that we can get 6 to 8 hours of rest by the morning. Sometime around sun coming up, hopefully that's a great time for us to match the natural world and get ourselves up. And then one of the best things that you can do to set yourself up for a good night's sleep the next day is to find the sun as soon as you get up and go be in it. Get yourself exposed to bright light. You can look at neurology research or you can take my word for it, but exposing yourself to bright light at the very beginning of your day actually kickstarts your inner rhythm. It's called your circadian rhythm to match the phases of the light that you experience during the day. Your best work, your most detailed work is going to come in the morning when you're most alert. As the day goes on, you can get more philosophical, get more creative. Some of you I know, like Aaron, you've shared with me in the past that you're a good night writer. Some people like to put themselves on the vampire shift because that's when things quiet down. They can be with their own thoughts and their mind wanders to some really interesting places. So if you're an artist or a creative type, maybe later in the day is the part for that kind of thinking. But for the detailed stuff, science, math, doing your financial accounting, thinking about little tools that you're using to fix something, that kind of work where you really have to pay attention to detail or work with machinery is usually going to happen earlier in the day. So I want to pause because a few people had asked me about time, and I've heard about sleep rhythms from a lot of you recently. Putting ourselves on a routine, and a big piece of the Open Source Learning Academy is our routine, right? Because we don't have the school bells telling us when to sit down and when to stand up and when to go to a different room. I'm curious to know if there's any feedback or comments on what I've said so far, or any questions. And since I'm going low tech today, I didn't do a presentation here and I don't have activities designed. This is a conversation. I would love to hear what you thought of those ideas. Dr. Preston, that sounds great. Dr. Preston, that sounds like crap. Whatever you think, I'm honestly asking you right now because I'd like to know, is this something that you do? Is it something that you don't do? What are your thoughts? So really, Anna, you wrote, no worries, I'm up all night with my crybaby. How is that for you when then you have to get up in the morning and do stuff out there in the day? It's tiring. So how do you compensate for that? Are you a napper? Do you give yourself a break? How can you balance those things so that you have energy that you can sustain? And I'm asking because I know you're not the only one. Jossie, you just made a really important point. Jossie, can I share this with people?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So Jossie wrote, and I'm the same way. Jossie wrote, I'm an overthinker, so I'm always up late. That's a really important one because it's hard for me to turn those gears down too. Does anything help you in those moments? Have you had a practice that actually works for you?
Sometimes, but not all the time.
Yeah, it's tricky. So what's something that you've done that has worked for you, even if it just worked once?
I don't know. Start like I just watch videos on YouTube, like try to fall asleep, or just put raining sounds on the background so I could fall asleep because it's really hard for me.
The raining sounds is a great idea. In fact, there's a whole system of research around that because it's called white noise. And it has two really great effects. Number one, it calms us down because we can visualize the rain and just be with something that doesn't have a beginning, middle, or an end or a problem to solve. But the other thing is that white noise also tends to drown out other ambient sounds, sounds that are just in our environment, you know, a car alarm or a door slamming. And that reduces the chance of us being startled back into being awake. Now, you know what I'm going to say about the YouTube stuff. On the one hand, I totally get it. It's distracting and it's entertaining. So there's that element of I can just sort of not deal with everything that was stressing me out in my real life, and I can be in this imaginary story. I get that. But the problem is just what I was saying about the blue screens and having the electronic stimulation, because that's what's actually happening. It may be relaxing parts of your mind, but it's actually waking up the neurons in your visual cortex of your brain so that you're like more alert than you thought you were. So if you're a person who has those gears turning, and this is why I started doing the mindfulness. Remember how last year we looked into the research about mindfulness, and what we discovered was that just sitting still and listening to your own breathing, and you have a thought come up, but then you listen to yourself breathe, or you have a question or something, and then you listen to yourself breathe. Do that just for a minute. Your pulse will go down, Your blood pressure will go down. You will be calmer. You will be less stressed. You will actually remember things better. So if there's something that comes up that you do need to put on your list for the next day, you can do that. And then you can let it go. And you'll feel lighter and more able to fall asleep. I have some people in the chat saying ASMR. There are some of those tools. I would rely on our minds as much as we possibly can for two really great reasons. Number one, we know that there's nothing in our physical minds. We might have some stinking thinking going on, but there's nothing in our physical brains that's going to hurt us. Can't really say the same about technology just because we don't know everything there is to know about it. But our brain, that thing we were born with, that thing we're going to have our whole lives, and there's nothing coming in that might pollute us because that's already part of us. That's number one. Number two is that if I get used to watching videos or used to listening to a sound effect, well, what happens if my battery goes out? What happens if my device breaks? What happens if I can't get that stuff? Well, I'll always have my mental practice, but I may not always have access to those tools. So the reason that I try and rely on myself is because I know I'll always be there. Before I move off the topic of sleep, is there any other contribution or question? Or I know some of you, are in a cycle where you're going to bed really late and getting up really late. Okay, another direct message. This is a great one. I use my fan as something that helps me fall asleep. All right. Now, is that because of the noise or the cool of the air? I'm just curious. Could be both.
It's both.
Yeah. Also makes a difference. Some people's rooms are too hot, and that actually influences our ability to get a good night's sleep. So you definitely want to sleep cooler, even if it's a little chilly at first, because your body will just like automatically hibernate a little bit and get cozy. This is really good. I didn't really know what was going to come up today. So it's great that we're starting with the basics because this is a foundation. It's really hard to do a good job. Well, it's actually just hard to do a good job. I think no matter what your trade and no matter what your class is, being at our best is a challenge. And one of the best ways we can meet that challenge is, like I said, by recharging our batteries. So thanks for bringing that up. When I think about routines and I think about the beginning of my day, which is how all this started, the second thing I think about is what I'm putting in my body. Now, you guys were telling, I know that you weren't like, well, there was one of you that was a creative fiction writer of horror, but everybody else was doing this unintentionally. Some of the dietary things that you guys shared with me last year, oh. And I think about how I ate as a teenager, man, I don't know how I lived through that. But I'll tell you at this point, it's super important to think about, if nothing else, how your blood sugar goes up and down and how that can really challenge your day. Now, I'm not saying that to give you a lecture on health food. I had a really wonderful piece of carrot cake last night and I loved every bite of it. So it's not like this is about go on a diet. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is, if you eat processed foods, like snack foods in bags, they have a lot of ingredients from salts to sugars to saturated fats that are going to cost you energy, cost you possibly your health if you eat enough of them. And one of the things that I've seen a lot of, I'm curious, how many people here know somebody, or maybe you do this yourselves, how many people know somebody who drinks coffee to wake up or to get more energy? Any caffeine fans in here? Red Bull or Coca-Cola, anything with caffeine? Anthony, you're a mechanic. I know you know people. Okay, Dr. Ulrich, coffee in the morning? Aaron, are you a coffee drinker?
Caffeine makes me sleepy.
Really? So that's an effect for a lot of people. What happens
And
to you, like right away when you drink it?
no, for me, it's just more, a lot of people link, like, caffeine making people drowsy is linked with people with ADHD a lot of the time. But basically, it doesn't happen instantaneously. It's more of like, it mellows me out slower, and usually because I don't drink caffeine often, I'm not I literally, like, if you tell me to make coffee, I'll make it the way my dad used to make it, which is literally like the smallest teaspoon of coffee and a bunch of milk.
Hmm.
So even then, I'm not ingesting so much caffeine as, the like normal way, I guess, of, water, a whole shit ton of coffee and sugar and all that stuff.
Right. It's interesting. So Liliana said, okay, yeah, we all know somebody, at least somewhere in our lives, that uses caffeine. And I use that verb uses on purpose. Caffeine is technically classified as a drug. And I watched people drink coffee my whole life. And I started drinking it myself, I think when I was in college. But I didn't really get it until two things happened. First of all, I actually consulted for Starbucks. So I was up in Seattle working with executives in Starbucks, and I wasn't paying attention. And the only thing that they were giving me to drink while we were in meetings all day long was, guess what? Starbucks coffee. So I'm just kind of absentmindedly drinking what I had to drink. Every time my throat got dry, I would have a sip and somebody would refill my cup. And then I guess it was about, I don't know, 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning. I started feeling not good at all. I got like clammy and I got this cold sweat and I started feeling weak. My stomach went into my heels and I just was like, oh, I actually had to leave the meeting and go back up to my hotel room and lay down. And I was in a full sweat. And what I realized was I had just had too much caffeine. I basically overdosed on coffee. And then I started paying attention later on when I left consulting and I started teaching. I would watch my students for all these standardized tests. And you guys know what that's like. It's like an endurance sport of boredom. You have to sit in a room for 2 or 3 hours doing multiple choice questions. It's practically torture. I'm not going to lie. It's a hard thing to do. And so many of my students would have a cup of coffee before they came in. And I'll see if I can find one of these videos, because I used to take a couple of videos and I would ask my students permission. Like after I would show them what I had seen, and I would say, hey, can I keep this and share it? But it was amazing to me. 20 minutes, they'd be like, oh yeah, okay, we're ready. We got this. And you would see like the caffeine buzz. After that 20 minutes, and they would be like face down on the desk, drooling all over their paper because they were sound asleep. Their blood sugar cratered. And so I'm telling you all this because I know that our culture, and when I say our culture, it's the culture we share, meaning the culture that watches TV commercials and banner ads on the internet, that buys stuff to fix our problems. One of the things that people sell are energy solutions, energy drinks, Gatorade, Red Bull. Even sometimes people talk about pills or vitamin supplements. Now, they don't have to be necessarily illegal drugs, but it tips into that too. And the sad thing to me is we have a perfectly good system for regulating our insulin and our blood sugar, and it keeps our energy on a pretty even keel. As long as we eat, you wouldn't put sugar in the gas tank of your car, you'd kill the engine. Well, in the same way, if we eat and drink things that give us good fuel, we're going to be just fine throughout our day. And what am I talking about? Proteins, things like fish, chicken, beef, or if you're a vegetarian or if you're inclined that way, things like beans and rice, complete proteins when they're in combination. By the way, that's why it's such a staple of Mexican food, because an entire culture somehow figured out along the way, beans and rice go pretty well together, not just taste, but also because of the way it makes us feel. It's good energy. So a combination of protein, having some healthy fats, things like avocados or walnuts or olive oil, and carbohydrates that give us a store of energy, potatoes, etc., apples. So if anybody wants or needs suggestions on that kind of detail, I know that's this kind of stuff that school doesn't normally cover, and it makes me mad because it should. Somewhere along the way, somebody should be teaching you about how to get that premium fuel. But in the meantime, be mindful of that stuff and pay attention to your own body. If you go for too long without eating, you're going to feel hungry, but you're also going to feel that energy drop. See how long it takes you. All of us are slightly different, but for most people, eating something about every 3 hours is a pretty good formula for keeping your blood sugar and your energy level at a pretty good constant. So back to the day. Let's assume that I've had 6 to 8 hours of good sleep. Let's assume that I've gotten some light on my face and I've gotten some activity and gotten my blood moving. Let's assume that I've had some sort of breakfast. Now I'm looking at my day. Who's telling me where to be? It's not school, because you have independent study with Dr. Ulrich, so you have the keys to the castle on your schedule. It might be work. It might be family. It might be a desire on your part to do something like exercise or be with friends or something else. Now the question becomes, how do I make choices about what am I going to do with my day? And do I want to think that hard every day? Or do I want to set myself up so that I have certain things that I just know are kind of automatic and become habit? Habits are not all bad. In fact, a lot of habits are really great. Our brains are efficiency machines. So we don't like to think our way through everything every day. That's why, well, I'm curious. How many of you brush your teeth? I almost said brush your hand with your teeth. How many of you brush your teeth with the same hand every day? Does anyone brush their teeth with both hands just because? Do you ever change hands when you brush your teeth? I'm getting some funny answers in the direct messages. So no, usually we use the same hand to brush our teeth. Well, trip out on this. Using the other hand to brush your teeth is actually good for your brain. Because when your brain gets really good at something, it tends to forget other stuff. That's why you don't write as well with your offhand as you do with the hand that you use to write all the time. But we don't really do what's good for our brain. We do what is efficient. So when we do the same things every day, that actually frees our brains up to do the more challenging work that requires us to think. It's really hard to solve a problem or even to do a course assignment or to practice a skill without exercising parts of our brain that we don't normally exercise. We need a lot of energy for that. So if we're going to use our energy there, we're going to conserve it somewhere else. And where we can conserve it is on our routines, like brushing our teeth. So where I want to guide this next few minutes is, where are the places that we can conserve our energy so that we have that energy to use it on the more challenging kinds of activities? So what are some things that you can do the same thing in the same way every day? I'd love to see, let's brainstorm in the chat. Can you get up around the same time every day? Can you make that part of your routine? Can you have the same thing for breakfast, or just plan on a routine like I'm going to brush my teeth and get dressed or run around the block? What are the kinds of things that you can plan for your day that will basically be the same or close every day? Zoe, what's one thing that you do basically the same way, give or take, every day? And you can put these in the chat. Like I said, if it's noisy in your background, that's totally fine. Okay, Dr. Ulrich is saying when I leave home to drive to work. All right. Aureliana says, I do my normal routine every day. It's like something I'm used to. That's fantastic. Okay, so like leaving around the same time in the morning. And do you take about the same kind of route to work, Dr. Ulrich? Do you take the same path? You're on mute.
Depends on traffic lights.
Okay.
Usually I can shave off 1 or 2 minutes here or there. But yes, typically, yes.
All right. Zoe says, I definitely get something to eat as soon as I wake up. Okay. So that's something that works for you. And Zoe, let me ask you, this may sound like a silly question, but I want to tease this out a little bit. Do you have to think about what food is? Do you have to think about where to go to get it? Or is it kind of the same place in the house and you get the same thing? Okay, so it's about the same thing every day. Can you imagine how hard life would be if every morning when you woke up and you were just about to swing your feet off of the bed onto the floor, that you actually had to convince yourself that the floor was solid and you weren't going to float through to outer space? How hard would it be if you actually had to think about every little detail of, wait a minute, did I just exhale or inhale? No, wait. Okay. Okay, now I'm inhaling. That's good. No, now I'm going to exhale. Now I'm going to inhale again. It would drive us nuts. So there are a lot of things that we can make part of our routines. So Zoe's saying it's the same place in the house and it's usually something different. Okay. Have you ever watched, well, I was going to say, have you ever watched someone in your house, but have you ever been that person who stands in front of the fridge with the door wide open? And then you're standing there and you're standing there. And then sometimes you even close the door and walk away. And then you come back and open the door like there's something going to be different. You know what I'm talking about? Zoe says, I've done that so many times. What is it about our brains that makes us do that? And how did I know? Well, we've all been there. And that's the part of our day. Here's the great news. If you don't get anything else out of this hour today, here's the best bonus. I'll put a bright red bow on this for you. There are so many little ways that you can make your life easier. We all have a sense that there's a lot out of our control. We all have a sense that, there's the environment, politics, and the economy, and sometimes we have to deal with school and work and family and all that stuff that's out there. But these things are totally in our control. I know that if I'm going to bed at night and I want oatmeal in the morning, I better have oats in the house. I know that if I want to have good energy and I need to get my rest, I'm going to lay in bed, even if I stare at the ceiling, instead of getting up and watching YouTube or doing something different, because at 1 o'clock in the morning, that's not going to help me. These kinds of choices are totally in your control. And so what I'm going to ask for this week, because these live sessions are super important. One of the things that Dr. Ulrich and I have both learned this semester is that there are ways that, doing the kinds of work that you all are doing right now for course credit, well, that actually makes a lot of sense for the school and the district. And it makes more sense in some ways than some of the things that we were doing last year if they don't know us and they're just looking at your websites. That's cool. But I also think there's a real value to these conversations. And there's a huge value, no matter whether we're talking about coursework or we're talking about this kind of in-person work, to posting stuff on your blogs that shows how you're thinking about your learning. So what I'd like to ask you for this week is if you would pretty please with sugar, no, actually pretty please with no sugar on top, because white refined sugar is not going to be good for our energy. But if we could please post on your blog about your routine, specifically what works for you. I'm not here to focus on the criticisms or the failures. We can always have that conversation. And you're welcome to reach out to both Dr. Ulrich and I at any time via email or whatever. We'll connect with you because we want to support you. But I'm really interested to know, like, what works for you. When Jossie said about the rain noise or the fan, and Aureliana was contributing some ideas, these are really important and we can learn from each other. So we've been here for about 40 minutes, and what I'd like to do is wrap up at about 1:45 today to give you some time while this is fresh to post on your blogs. And I'll stay on with you until almost 2, so that if you have questions, if anybody's got blog issues or whatever else is going on, I want to help make sure that your thinking is visible, so that if, when Dr. Ulrich and I meet with the superintendent and we're showing off your blogs because we're so proud of you, that the thinking you share in these conversations or even in your private moments, whether it's an assignment or whether it's about something like this, that we can see it on your blog, because that's the evidence that you're really doing the work of learning. Does anybody have any questions about what I'm asking? Okay, I'm just putting this in the chat. Okay, so the blog post is going to be called My Routine. That way I'll know what to look for, and so will Dr. Ulrich. The focus is, what routines do you have that help you get rest, recharge your batteries, keep your energy up, and manage your time? Now that last thing, oh, great. Jossie just asked, what categories would that post go in? The beautiful part here is, would it be personally meaningful? Sure. But for your academic courses, well, off the top of my head, if you have an English course, you're writing, so that would probably count. If you have anything related to, say, biology, that would count. Dr. Ulrich, do you have any other suggestions when we're thinking about this?
Yeah, they could also include advisement regardless of what other area it's related to. Put it in advisement.
Okay, thank you for that. Jossie,
That
that
helps. That
yeah.
helps me keep track of it.
That was a great question. And what I was going to say before that, Jossie, is that the managing time part, that's going to be our focus next week, because that deserves its own thing about being productive, and then also building in time, like you were saying earlier, for just having our own sense of like being okay and enjoying our lives. So I want to devote more time to that next week. But if you have routines, then by all means, please include that in the post. So let's spend this next few minutes opening your dashboards right now and doing this while it's fresh, so that when we're done with our meeting, you can be done with your blog post. And at the very end, I'm also going to mention a link to the school survey. That's one order of business that's on the open source learning site today, but I'll also share a link for that in the blog. So if you finish your blog post, please let me know and I'll send you that link, and we'll wrap up in about 10 minutes. Jossie says she submitted it already. Jossie, you're awesome. Okay, so if anybody needs help with a blog, let me know. When you're finished with your blog post, you can click on that link that I just put in the chat, and the access code is your student ID number. And please do let us know when your blog post is live, because I would love to read it. Hey, Liliana, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And I know you get your hands full, but I'm passing along. I just got your token link from Martin, so I just put that in a direct message to you. If you click that, you'll be able to reset your password. I just read the tram email, Dr. Ulrich.
You read the what?
The tram email.
Oh, true.
Did they also do the one in Albuquerque?
There are 3 that play Swiss music and spin around. And so Palm Springs Pilatus, I don't think there is one in Albuquerque that does that.
Well,
Is there?
fortunately, it didn't play Swiss music.
They usually do. They seriously, yeah.
That's awesome.
It used to. The one in Palm Springs used to. I'm disappointed they quit the polka music.
Well, it was funny because after a day long of seeing no one on the trail, all of a sudden there were all of these tourists. Let me see if I can find a couple of pictures to share.
When does it usually snow? When does the snow start up there? Isn't it usually snow up there now?
Next month. Yeah.
Okay.
They just started getting light showers, and we picked a great day because the wind at the top yesterday was about, or 2 days ago was about 18 miles an hour, but then yesterday it was about 45.
Ooh.
So, and it goes from, you've got the sort of the low-lying chaparral and the view of the desert
Mm-hmm.
kind of at the bottom, but then everything changes. And by the time, this is only at about 7,000 feet, but you've got the Jeffrey Pines and you're above the cloud level. That's actually looking across the San Gorgonio Pass to Big Bear.
Hmm.
And that was about the spot where I took that picture and was feeling pretty good. And then I found out that we had to traverse that canyon.
Oh, wow.
That sucked.
So next time you might want to check out alltrails.com to get recent trail reviews.
Oh no, the guy that I was up there with, he's done it like 20 times. He's lived here for 30 years. And that's the only way I would do it. I just,
Okay.
so I knew that he was solid on it, and I just, it's in your head, but it was like, you didn't mention this part, Kurt. That which doesn't kill us, et cetera, et cetera. All right, how's everybody doing on their blog posts? Does anybody need any help?
These students are good at blog posts.
I am super proud of everybody in this program. And I know a few of you have a meeting coming up at 2, so we're going to take a break in 3 minutes, give people about 5 minutes to stretch their legs before your 2 o'clock. And if anybody else needs anything, as always, please feel free to reach out on email. And if I don't see you or hear from you before, we will be back live right here on this Zoom channel next Monday, the 31st.
Hi,
the
Brenda.
last
This
day
is
of
Brenda
October
at
already.
First Apache. I got a.
Costumes aren't required, right, Dr. Preston?
Oh, on the 31st?
Okay, well, he's a real
Nope.
piece of work, so
I hate
apologize for
Halloween.
that.
I do too.
I'm not, you know, my whole life I've been sort of lukewarm on it, but
Oh, God, no.
every
you
year
are
there's a
not.
new scare.
But,
This year, Sentinel dressed up as
is there
candy.
any way that somebody could address more specifically what his beef is? I know they beefed about it a year and a half.
you-
Yeah. All right, gang. Aaron, Anthony, Jossie, Zoe, Aureliana, does anybody have any questions or need anything before we break? Thanks, Jossie. Thanks, Anthony. Anthony, it was good to see you, man. Even if it was just your name, I'm glad that you're here.
Because I have a brand new tenant here.
All right, everybody,
Yeah.
we're going to break for the day.
And so.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that we had 5 students, maybe, and we'll
Yeah,
grow.
We had
Talk
6
to
at
your
one
friends.
point.
And
All right, thanks, Aureliana. Have a great day, everybody. I'll
Bye,
see you next
everybody.
time. Bye.
Oh, cool.